you, Anna Mae. We want to welcome everybody who's joining us online today at the Garden City Church of the Brethren. I'm sorry, this is about as much voice as I have today, so it might be a shorter sermon. Of course, it might not be. You never know. But if you'll live with my voice, we'll be all right. We are in the middle of a series called Only God, as we focus on things that only God can do. This morning we're going to talk about how only God can break the chains that hold us back. If you have your outlines, you will be there in the outline in just a couple of moments, and in a moment or two we'll be in Mark 5, so you want to get your Bible set to that passage. So what do I mean by a chain? It is anything that can hold you hostage, like guilt, shame, perfectionism, codependency, envy, anger, alcohol, drugs, bitterness, and so many more things. The Bible often calls it a stronghold, something that affects your thoughts and your relationships. It has you tied up at night. You cannot sleep. Recently, I heard about a letter. It's called A Love Letter from Addiction. I'd like to read it for you. You can later, you don't need to do it during the sermon, but later in the afternoon you can Google it. It's actually on, you can find it on Google. It's called A Love Letter from Addiction. Let me read it for you. Dear friend, I've come once again to visit you. I love to see you suffer mentally, physically, spiritually, and socially. I want to make you restless so that you can never sleep. I want to make you jumpy, nervous, and anxious. I want to make you agitated and irritable so everyone around you will make you uncomfortable. I want you to be confused and depressed so you cannot think clearly and positively. I want you to feel guilty and remorseful for all the things in the past and will never be able to let them go. I want to make you angry and hateful towards the world for the way it is and the way that you are. I want you to feel sorry for yourself and blame everything but me for the way things are. I want you to continue to be deceitful and untrustworthy and continue to con as many people as possible. I want to make you fearful and paranoid for no reason at all. I want you to wake up at all hours of the night screaming for me. You know you cannot sleep without me. I'm even in your dreams. I want to be the first thing you think about when you wake up and the last thing you think about before you go to bed. I deeply appreciate how much you are sacrificing for me. Countless good jobs you have given up for me. All the friends you really cared for, you gave them up for me. I'm eternally grateful, especially for the family you turned yourself against for me. But do not despair, my friend, for on me you can always depend. After you have lost all these things, you can still depend on me to keep you in a living hell. Mind, body, and soul. You will never be satisfied. Signed, Your Addiction. All I can say is, wow. But the realization is, and Vaughn alluded to it a little bit in his prayer time today, we all have chains. We all have chains that need to be broken. Perhaps maybe your life is spinning out of control like so many others. I want to tell you a story about a little boy. This little boy goes into a shop, and the shopkeeper asked him, what's he looking for? He said, I'm looking for Does detergent. He said, what do you want the detergent for? He said, I want to wash my cat. He said, son, that detergent is too strong for your cat. He said, no, the cat will be fine. So he sells him the Does detergent, and a couple weeks later, the little boy's back in the shop. And the shopkeeper said, how's your cat? He said, oh, the cat died. He said, I told you that does detergent would kill your cat. He said, no, it wasn't the detergent, it was the spin cycle. Now I have all the cat lovers hating me for a moment. I'm sorry. It's just a joke. But how often do we find ourselves caught in the middle of the spin cycle of life? We're going to be, that's actually point number one, caught in the spin cycle. If you're following in the outline, caught in the spin cycle of life. We are caught in there. Sometimes our lives just seem to be spinning out of control, and we are holding on for dear life. Maybe you can identify with a passage that Paul writes, Romans 7:15. For I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want to do, but I do the very thing I hate. And that really is letter A. Paul describes what the spin cycle is. It's pretty clear, isn't it? We find ourselves doing the very thing we do not wish to do. The thing we know we shouldn't do, we still do it. But I want you to know, Paul struggled with it too. Satan leads us in ways we thought we would never go. You see, the enemy is alive and well. Now, tomorrow's Halloween, and we think that Satan is probably going to come to our front door dressed up in a little red outfit with a pitchfork. And that's not Satan. That's just a costume. He is the enemy. He is the enemy, and he's come to mess with your life. He didn't care about you before you became a Christian because he already had you. But once you become a Christian, he's all over you. Trust me, he's all over you. But that's why we need someone greater than the enemy. That's letter number B, if you're following in the outline. We need someone greater than the enemy. Some of us think that the enemy is the person that roots for the opposing team in a contest. Or maybe it's the person who disagrees with our politics. That's why Paul reminded us in Ephesians 6, after he told us what the armor of God, and you remember that great passage in Ephesians 6 where he talks about the armor of God, and he talks about all of the different things, and I've reminded you numerous times, and I will continue to remind you, all of the armor goes on the front. There's nothing on the back side. So Paul wants us to stand and face the enemy. And then after he lists all of that wonderful armor, here's what he writes in the 12th verse. He says, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. We have a real enemy who's working overtime to divide us, to separate us, to capture our minds, to fill us with hateful thoughts, to blind our eyes. He wants us to set our sights squarely on our wants, our needs, our rights. It's all about us, 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 us. That's why we need a real chain breaker. Jesus is the real chain breaker for all people. Jesus is the real chain breaker. That's point number 2. I want to set a scene for you. If you have your Bibles, you can turn in Mark 5. He goes to the other side of the lake. It's a great passage. I'm not going to read it for you all at one time. We're going to read it section by section by section. He takes the disciples to a place they've never been before. And I want to tell you, it really takes them out of their comfort zone. He takes them to the godless side, to a world totally unfamiliar to them. And sometimes God is going to put you and I in those same situations, where we are among people who are not followers of God, who are literally chained with whatever it is, whatever that chain might be. Call it anger, hatred, bitterness, alcohol, drugs, the list goes on. So let me read for you what it says here in Mark 5. Just going to read the first 8 verses. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains he was always crying out and cutting himself with the rocks. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. Crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the God, Most High God? I adjure you, my God, to do not torment me." For he was saying to come out of the man, "You unclean spirit." One of the awesome things about Jesus, and the amazing thing that we have opportunity to do, is Jesus, and it's, if you're following the outline, it's Jesus reaches out to notorious sinners. Now, I like that phrase, notorious sinners. He's accused of all the time being with sinners, being with sinners, being with sinners. And he calls us to do the same. Not to be in our little holy huddles here on Sunday morning, but to be out in the world, influencing the world for Christ. Jesus breaks through all sorts of barriers when he went there, social, economic, religious. He broke the man-made rule of all the religious leaders. He's in a place he honestly should not be. He's with a man who everyone knows is repulsive, but not Jesus. We've seen him at other times with lepers, with blind, with paralyzed, with harlots, with notorious sinners. He loved them all. He even chose some to be a part of his team of leaders, like Matthew the tax collector. He loved them all. Now I want you to get this scene. They get out of the boat, and immediately comes this man with an unclean spirit. Now, can you imagine you're one of the 12 disciples with him, and all of a sudden you realize you're at the tombs. You're in a graveyard, and here comes a demon-possessed man screaming and yelling coming out of the tombs. It is a sight. I think they're absolutely terrified. Here's this freaky guy who lives among the tombs where dead bodies were. Everything about his life is marked with death. He was chained up out there because no one wanted to be around him. How dangerous do you have to be chained up in a graveyard? Think about it. He was unwanted, unloved, shame-ridden, confused and insane, dangerous and relegated to living alone. Some of us in this room and listening to me on the internet can identify with it. You have felt the hurt and the pain. He's in so much pain that he's cutting himself. You may know people who have cut themselves. It's a serious problem, especially among our youth. And I think of these very sobering words from a song by Johnny Cash. The song is called Hurt. Listen to just the first few lines. I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. I focus on pain, the only thing that's real. If you've struggled with self-cutting, or you know someone who has, you know there's real pain there. Not just the physical pain of cutting yourself, but there's real pain inside their heart. But Jesus meets him right where he is. And Jesus, it becomes the absolute best description of what real is. Jesus sees us as we really are. He saw the man as he really was, and he sees you and me as we really are. He sees our pain. He saw this tortured man, but realized the battle is really between the enemy that we talked about before. It's right in the middle of the man's life. We may call him the father of lies. We may call him the deceiver. But make no mistake, Satan's only goal, according to John 10, is to steal and destroy. That's his only goal. And Jesus, as we read the end of John 10:10, says, but Jesus came to give life, and to give life abundantly. The enemy wants to destroy everything in your life. He wants you to have no moment of peace. He wants to ruin every good relationship you have. He wants to divide families and friends. That's why we need Jesus greater today than at any time in the history of the world. Because he is greater than the enemy. He needed Jesus, and that man knew it. He ran up to him and begged for Jesus to help him. Isn't it interesting that everyone associated with the man was terrified of him, but the legion of demons inside of him were terrified of Jesus? Let's pick up the story in verse 9 and 10. Jesus asked him, what is your name? He replied, my name is Legion, for we are many. And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. You see, a legion is like, it's a military term. It's like 6,000 men in an army. I don't know that he had 6,000 demons in him, but he had many demons in him. He was emotionally and physically held by chains, where day and night his only friends were death and darkness. There's a great description of Jesus in John 1. We talked about John 1 last week. I want to go just a little bit further into John 1, where Jesus talks about, or John records about Jesus in relationship to darkness. Listen to verses 3 to 5. It's not in your outline, I'm sorry. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. It was Jesus, the light of the world, who overcame the darkness. It can't get much darker than being a demon-possessed man locked up in chains in a graveyard at midnight, cutting and bleeding and screaming. But even at that level of darkness, it was no match for Jesus. You see, the light always chases away the darkness. So I don't know what level of darkness you have, what you're dealing with. But I want to tell you today, Jesus is stronger than it is. He is the light of the world, so don't let what's keeping you up at night continue to bind you and hold you back. Jesus can set you free. I am so grateful for my friend who shared today in our prayer time about her friend, who is a mutual friend of mine. I know him very well. That he's 5 days sober. We ought to be jumping up and down in joy for the freedom that he's had for 5 days and praying for 5 more days. You see, you count every day a victory. And the victories are found in Jesus Christ. Some of us, for us, the problem is we see the light, but we don't want to move till we feel the heat. We wait till things are crashing in around us before we move. Others are telling you, oh, wait till you hit rock bottom. You don't have to wait to hit rock bottom. You can come to Jesus anywhere along the line. Don't have to wait for it. Someone has said you don't have to ride the elevator all the way to the basement. You can get off on the 3rd floor. We don't have to let people crash and burn. Some are going to just because that's the way they are. But we need to communicate to them that we have a God that reaches them right where they are, wherever they are in that process. Number 3, Jesus wants to fully take care of you. Jesus wants to fully take care of you. So we pick up the story again. And he decides to send the demons into the pigs. There's somebody raising pigs, which is really ironic in a Jewish nation because pigs aren't kosher, if you know what I mean. So he sends the demons into the pigs, and it says about 2,000 of them went running off the cliff and into the ocean. So what do you do if you're a pig farmer and you've lost all your pigs? They go into town and they start telling people, you ought to see what we just saw. This guy came out here, sent all these demons into our pigs, and they crashed into the ocean. Now pick it up in verse 15. And this is a great passage. And when they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, these are the very same people that tied him up in chains and wanted nothing to do with him, and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, they were afraid. What a transformation. Clothed and in his right mind. Scott Nichol has this great quote. I put it in our outline. I'm going to give it to you so you can fill in the blanks. There is nothing that could be uncovered about you that cannot be covered by the grace of God. Let me say it again. There's nothing that could be uncovered about you that cannot be covered by the grace of God. Jesus, I think, took his overcoat and put it and wrapped it around the man, because he was naked. You remember, he was naked. And it says when they found him, he was fully clothed. I think Jesus took that cloth, wrapped it around him. Isaiah puts it this way in Isaiah 61:10. I will greatly rejoice in the Lord. My soul shall exult in my God, for he has clothed me with the garments of salvation. He has covered me with the robe of righteousness. As a bridegroom decks himself like a priest with a beautiful headdress, and as a bride adorns herself with the jewels. Earlier in our service today, we sang a specific song, and we sang a specific verse. In the 4th verse of the beautiful song by William Bradbury called On Christ the Solid Rock, listen to these words and think about being fully dressed. When he shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I then in him be found, dressed in his righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the throne. This man who's known by sin and madness, who cuts himself and has outbursts and screams, is now fully clothed by Jesus. I am convinced that Jesus wrapped his garment around him like God's grace wraps himself around us. He wants to do that for you and for me. Some of you will say to me, Bob, I'm too hopeless. I'm too far gone. You are never too far gone for God. Your chains are never too strong for him. But like this man in the tombs, we need to humble ourselves and cry out to Jesus, asking him to break our chains, stop the crazy spin cycle of our lives. We need him to do what only he can do to break the chains that hold us back. Let's take one final look at one final passage, 18 to 20. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged that he might be with him, and he did not permit him, but said to him, Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis, that means 10 cities, how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone was marveled. You see, when God breaks the chains in our life, we need to go tell the world what God has done. The people were amazed by the transformation of his life. Jesus tells him to go and tell others. The writer Lecrae says these words, if we can become honest about our scars, we can show other people that wounds can be healed. You see, our wounds can be healed. We have freedom. It comes with humility. We have to drop the denial. We have to want. We have to want to let God break our chains. We have to admit that we're in the spin cycle, and we have to admit that we're broken people. We are all broken people. But I need help. And I know the one who is the real chain breaker. And that's Jesus Christ. In conclusion, isn't it time to ask God to stop the spin cycle in your life? Isn't it time to ask God to stop the spin cycle in our lives? This morning we've talked a lot about breaking the chains. It's a battle. It's a battle that belongs to God, not a battle that belongs to you and me, because we can't physically do it, but God can. We're going to close our service today with a great Phil Wickham song called The Battle Belongs. And what Phil Wickham is saying is the battles that we have, the chains that we have, all of that battle that's going on inside of us, we need to turn it over to God, because he can take it from us when we are weak. Let's stand together as we sing The Battle Belongs.